All right. Uh-oh. Okay. Oh. Okay, we're live, everybody. So I'm gonna go bring us in 1 second. All right. I'll be sharing the page to everybody in a few minutes so that you can share as well. All right, welcome everybody. This is Shy Panther and Friends, and today is Thursday, February 11th, 2021. The time is now 7:31 p.m. Central Standard, and we're happy to be back. I'm your host, Gail. I have with me my panel, Marcy and Clarence, and I have Danielle Berry, who's our guest this evening, and they'll be introducing themselves. All right, now, if this is your first time with Shy Panther and Friends Show, I just want you to know you're in for a treat. So stick around for the next hour. Please share, please like the page. And Shy Panther and Friends is a platform that the mission is to provide quality programming, and our goal is to uplift and to educate. So we host ordinary people with extraordinary stories to share, and that's what we're about to do in the next few minutes. All right. So, Marcy, MJ, go ahead and introduce yourself. You're on mute, ma'am.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcella Johnson, or Marcy. They call me MJ also. I am the creator and owner of Taylor Beauty's Beard Oil. And I am just really thankful to be here tonight with our special guest and Clarence.
Okay, Clarence, you're up next.
Yeah, Marcy gave me a compliment. I almost joked. Hi, everybody. My name is Clarence. Uh, I am the owner of a retirement program. Me. I'm a retired sergeant of police with the Chicago Police Department. I also spent an additional 17 years down at the Office of Emergency Management, where I was the deputy director over police and fire dispatch operations, and that's where I met Gail and Marcy, and I had to keep them in line until I left. But I'm glad to be here, and Miss Berry, glad to meet you too. Also, I look forward to a very lively conversation.
Okay, now for our guest this evening, Miss Danielle Berry, and she is a public school educator. Good evening, Danielle.
Oh, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Gail, for having me. I just got out of class, so I ran over into this Zoom meeting. So I'm excited to even be considered for this. My name is Danielle Berry. I currently work as a school leader in an urban public school, and I have been in education now for 8 years. In addition to working in a number of different industries, from media to cosmetics to sales. And I'm excited and I look forward to a very rich conversation tonight as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our topic this evening is Black women and social justice, and we'll be looking at the issues of Black women and social justice through the term intersectionality. Um, Sorry, guys, I'm looking at my computer because it's doing something weird. Okay, so how I decided that I really wanted to say something or to bring this show together is that the concept came from a growing concern for Black women and women of color and how our well-being, our lives, and our existence is not valued. So a few days ago, I watched a video with Dr. Kimberle Crenshaw, and she was doing a TED Talk, and she is an attorney. She's a civil rights advocate, philosopher, and a leading scholar of critical race theory. And she developed the theory of intersectionality. So I thought I have to do something because the video, you can find it on YouTube. It was recorded 4 years ago. And it struck me so much when she got to the part where she was addressing the audience. It was a huge audience, and she was addressing them. And she asked everyone who could stand up to stand up as she read names. And these were names of Black males who had been killed at the hands of the state, the police. So she read off this list of names, and there were several people who stood up. So she gave the same instruction again, but this time she read off Black women who had been killed at the hands of the state, the police. And only a few people stood up because they recognized the names. Now that struck me like a ton of bricks. And it makes me want to cry even right now because how can that be? I mean, we hear it all the time. And even as recent as yesterday, Channel 9, Professor Fountain, Sun-Times reporter, they began to do a series on the 51 women who were missing and killed in Chicago, where their stories were grouped together as if they weren't individual human beings. And their cases are not solved. It's still, no one knows, nobody's in custody or anything. And I'm sure if you talk to some of their families, you will hear that they tried to give information to the police and to detectives so they could follow up and things like that, but yet nothing. And just the simple fact that we just don't know, we're not aware of it. And the people who do know about these incidents, they're usually the family or people who live in the neighborhood. But we should be able to hear about these incidents because it's important. It matters, because there's no way that many women could be killed in a white community and there's no uproar. There's no sense of urgency about it. To me, that is extremely urgent. The condition of Black women and women of color, it's extremely important because also in the TED Talk, she talked about, Dr. Crenshaw talked about how women and girls as young as 6 or 7, all the way up to the age of 96, who had been killed in one way or another, whether it was an accident or however. But the simple fact that we know nothing about it, nothing. And that, I mean, that's going to lend over into the whole concept of intersectionality that talks about we are in a very unique position in this world, in this society, because there are many things. We're standing, like she put an outline up of an intersection, and we're in the middle, and we're the only people, Black women or women of color, who have all of these intersections headed toward them. And this has created, compounded together, has created an incredible oppression. But on top of that, just this erasing and the visibility, of, invisible is what I'm trying to say, invisible concept, it's just too much to even consider. Because I honestly thought that the world, the state, the country, the city cared more about what happened to me. And it ain't true. It's not true. Don't believe it. No. So, I mean, so I wanted to open this up. I didn't want to make this solely about what happens to us as women in the hands of the state, because violence happens to us in many levels and in many situations, and we will get into that. So anybody want to jump in?
Well, let me jump in head first. To me, I think one of the biggest issues, or the lack thereof, is a good, strong media presence that reports on what happens in our community. The fact that the media controls a lot of what we get in terms of information. And to that extent, whoever has control of the media conglomerate, they control the information that you get or don't get. And I think last week during one of our discussions, I had indicated that I was very disheartened with the selling of Jet Magazine and Ebony. Well, they're all part of the same thing, but that was something that you could point to and say that the Black community definitely read, or the Chicago Defender. Those newspapers and those media outlets reported on a lot of information that was going on in the Black community. And we have to understand that that is an area that is very important in our lives. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that many things that we don't hear about is because the people that control the media don't really care about us unless it's something that and I say we, I mean, as a people, if we're engaged in negative activity, you hear all about it. But if it's something positive, you may or may not hear about it, depending on whether this is a slow news day or not. But that's just part of the comments that I wanted to make about that. I have some other things, but I don't want to take up all the time.
Well, you're not taking up a lot of
Well,
time.
anyway, I have so much. Are you done, Clarence? Sorry.
Yeah, that was the point. That was one of the points that I wanted to make, just to get us started, and then we can take off from there.
So, and I'm kind of glad we're having this dialogue because I saw the same video, and I had the same emotions as Gail. And you have this ideology that for years that at some point, value will be given. And I mean, there's so many areas that I can touch on as to why we're not valued. But number one, I think we have to start with ourselves and place value on ourselves. It's all these people that come up, like several years ago, they came up with some Japanese guy came up with the fact that Black women were only worth $5, if it was even that much, you know. And I've learned to just look at the fact that you have no credence with whatsoever to tell me what my value is, and to put a dollar value on it, and just to put a dollar value on humans, period. So that did not I mean, I read it and left it alone, and walked away, because you can't tell me that. I don't even listen to that nonsense. But I think that in society, and we look around and we know our worth. We know how valuable we are. And I have just resigned myself to just come to terms with the fact that in this country, period, and I know people may not agree, I'm not going to spend time trying to make people love me, value me, or even give me just acknowledge me, because I'm going to exist, and I'm going to exist the way that I want to exist. And it's hurtful, and it's not, I just believe it's not going to change. And like I stated before, it's not for us to change the minds and hearts or anything like that for other Americans that are non-Black. And it's for us to decide, because we didn't create this. We did not create this. It's for us to decide how we are going to go forward, or how we choose to live our lives. And I don't care if you put me in a whole category of a bunch of other people in your little head. It doesn't matter to me. And I know people might say, "Oh, well, that's a trivial answer." This and that. There's no real answer for exactly what goes on in this country. I mean, only in years, not even that many years past. I think it was in 1970s, I believe. I'm not exactly sure. I have to look that up again. That it was, they finally passed a law saying it was illegal to rape Black women, because there was a time when it was not illegal, even in this 20th century. So I don't struggle with what people say, or these statistics, and who writes this shit, who writes it, who puts this up. But when she put a name to what we go through, intersectionality, that right there gave me revelation as to, okay, now I get it. Now how they bundle everything together, and how she gave one case of a woman, whereas she felt she was being discriminated against when this company wouldn't hire her, and the judge felt that she was not discriminated against, because they did not discriminate against her because she was Black, because most of the Black men at the company got discriminated against because they were Black. They did not discriminate against her because she was a woman, because most of the people that worked in administration were female, but they were female white, and the men were Black males. So this is how she came up with this intersectionality with this woman's case, and the judge said it can't be both. Why can't it be both? Why can't it be both? And when you have people of power like that, a judge that sits there and say that, well, they didn't discriminate against you, you're not one or the other. But she was both. She was both. And this is our daily life. We're both.
Right, right. And
So it like that,
right.
So
I was going to say too that Dr. Crenshaw said that legislation about race is framed to protect Black men, and legislation about sexism is understood to protect white women. Where are Black women in that? You see what I mean? So, of course,
Right.
it's not that we are so concerned what people think, but when it is affecting our lives, it is affecting our lives to the point that when we have a complaint, or when we're violence is imposed on us from health professionals, from the school system, from at work, in housing. You just can pick a point. Pick a point. That's when you have to say something. You have to do something. Even to the point that if you're killed, that they won't even acknowledge that the crime happened to you. They won't even acknowledge that you are a whole person, no matter your background. You are a whole person. They didn't talk about your story, and they definitely didn't mention your name, because otherwise, all of us would know more women who have been killed in one way or another. We would know. And that is a disgrace. That's the United States should be completely ashamed of themselves for that. That's a damn disgrace.
It really is. It really is. And in your point is what you're saying. That's what I am saying. But we're
Mhm.
going to continue. We're going to continue as Black women in this country to fight. Period. We
Exactly.
fight in our own race when it comes to men. Don't think that our men are not chauvinistic. Some of them don't value our concerns. I mean, being married for 34 years, I go through it. I mean, my husband and I go through it, and we have to talk about that. With our values, I mean, not our values, but there's no validity when you have a concern. You're just emotional. You know what I'm saying? You're just emotional.
You guys bring up some really good points. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Crenshaw, and as an educator, it's very important. Like, one thing that guides a lot of the decisions that I make as it pertains to Black children or Black families is the statistic of the demographic with the highest level of disciplinary action against them are Black girls, Black female students. So what Clarence spoke to earlier in regards to having the opportunity to leverage media and be able to spin our own narratives, and those outlets that had historically to like really drive the stories that impact and cover Black life in the positions of within the context of America, or in Chicago, or in rural areas, or like southern states. There has been a decrease of that. But I think what is more important for us to not only recognize the impact and the implications that intersectionality have amongst um, women, girls, Black people as a whole, and then Black people, you also have to understand that Black people are not monolithic beings. Like, we have Southern people, we have Jamaicans, we have Haitians, and all of these different facets of like what is important or what is prioritized amongst Black communities. I think we also need to really garner like momentum around the policies that impact Black women. So in terms of like intersectionality being evident in like our healthcare system, people may do like say, oh, we just did a study on a whole bunch of Black people. What are the age groups? What are the gender of the people that are being considered, how does that affect Black women in different stages of like their levels of health, even from the concerns of research supports that given like surveying medical professionals, they do not believe that Black women experience pain like other races. So in terms of like having friends who are in the healthcare field and they may have a patient at night and like, I'm asking for medication for like pain management. They're like, oh, just give her some Tylenol threes. Well, you're giving Betsy down the hallway morphine or like something higher up because they know how to navigate, and then they're just like, they know how to whereas it's expected to like, oh, they can take it, they're strong, right? And that trickles down to like a continued mistrust of health professionals, a desire to like avoid medical practices that can save our lives or improve our overall health, where it's just like, well, I'll take another approach to my pain management and or like medical treatment. And it just further hinders our ability to live the quality of life that we should be living. So I think in terms of thinking about intersectionality, not only do we have to continue to find spaces in which we can share narratives and promote like these are things that are taking place, and these stories impact people from across the globe because Black people are everywhere, but they're not shared, and they should serve as catalysts to promote the type of policies that are going to uplift and advance us as a people.
I think one of the things that uh, we're uh, we're fighting against and struggling with is for generations we have had others to define us as a people because uh, we hear the story. Well, we were taken out of our ancestors were taken out of our original country, and we were brought to a strange place. And then because we now are exposed to a different culture, we're being taught by the people who have already set up or are already a part of this culture. So we have to either assimilate or be exterminated, one or the other. And all of that has been tried uh, in one form or another. And I think too, we have had a breakdown of our family structure, and that was allowed to happen because other people viewed it as a means of control to determine this is how we want this group of people to respond to what it is that we're doing. So in order to do that, we take away the value of family structure. It gets eliminated. Uh, I used to talk to my mother and my grandmother, and they would talk about if you were on a public aid back in the 40s or way back in those times, and you were on aid and you were receiving aid for children, your husband couldn't couldn't live in the same house with you. That was the beginning of the separation of the Black family. And therefore, because of that, you had the devaluing or someone else defining what your value was as a person. And naturally, women got left out of the equation because they were not treated in the same manner that men were. Danielle, you're waiting to say something, so I'm gonna shut up and let you chime in.
I agree. However, only partially, because I feel like, yes, it was systematic, like it's a systematic approach that dates back even prior to the projects. Like if you think about Chicago and the 1920s, in which there were so many Black people that migrated from the South into areas that were desirable because they were like more commercial spaces. So we are a huge factory company, like the stockyards, our railroad system, things that we just used to manufacture, which made it really appealing to escape not only Jim Crow South, but also be able to afford like a better quality of life. I think that in addition to the family being like in jeopardy for decades, for generations, we also need to think about like the importance of intersectionality as it is juxtaposed to like womanhood. So like the danger in not recognizing womanhood, or just like defining us as like, well, we come from broken homes, but like I'm still a woman, like I'm still a woman. Whereas the idea of white womanhood is a fear that is still happening today, because white men want to preserve white womanhood and whiteness, and they are willing, they will kill us. They will kill our children. They will enact all of this trauma onto us. And like people, their trauma holds into our DNA, and we pass it on to our children, to our grandchildren. All of the trauma that your grandmother experienced is within your cells. So I think like when we talk about intersectionality, it is important to consider like the family unit as it relates to Blackness, but we also have to think about how womanhood is positioned as it relates to Blackness. Like, that's why we know about these Black men. We know about Trayvon Martin. We know about all of these men or males where the energy and the amplified voice that is like connected to like Black death, that is also female, is very, very different, because the media or society would suggest, well, we talking about Black people. So if we talking about Trayvon, y'all should, I mean, Sandra Bland is in that too. Like, no, she's not. Like, she was a woman who got arrested for a traffic violation, and now she's dead. Like, what's going on? And there's no conversation about it. When they go to court and there's an investigation, nothing is found out. And we should be pacified and suffice. Like, it should be sufficient. Like, well, we're saying say his name, because like that's like all of y'all, when that's just not the case, where so many structures have been in place to preserve white womanhood, and it's not the same as Black womanhood at all, because we're just less than 100 years out of even being considered human, like women. Like, we were like the equivalent of like a lawnmower, or just something that will produce more labor.
Exactly.
Like, we are just entity to produce
Yeah.
additional labor.
Exactly.
And you know
Kind
what,
of
too?
taboo fetishy sex thing. It's just dark.
Exactly. And another, just to add on to what you're saying, Danielle, is that when these incidents were happening to Black women, and they still are, where are the women's groups? Where are they? Where are those groups that are organized, the feminist groups and these other groups? Where were they? And it's kind of implicated that, it is implicated that they weren't around, they didn't consider what happened to these women because they were out there doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing or something like that. And it's like, really? But they're still human beings and they were killed. So you don't feel that that's, you don't feel that that's enough, or if that's enough of an outcry to rally around and get together and come and protest and do something about it and march and do all of these things that you would do if it were white women being killed like this. There would be new laws, new legislation, everything written to protect them if this was happening to them. And then the same, along the same lines as you were talking about the value of women and womanhood, the girl child, how valued are they even through history as far as being taught to pursue a profession and their gender roles, period. Girls don't do this, boys do this, or gender roles. Just as you tell them, a boy would be encouraged to go into engineering. There was a time they would be encouraged to go into engineering or become a physician, where a girl would be geared toward nursing and becoming a teacher, which are all wonderful professions. But she could be a math prodigy. But historically, you push them into these gender roles. So all of that has to do with being valued as a woman.
Well, Gail, what you're saying,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Clarence.
what you're saying is the fact that we have to be careful not to allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into what someone else think we should be. We should think in terms of whatever my mind can conceive, I can achieve. But that has to be taught, and it has to be taught at a very young age and brought up thinking that way. I I like to brag on my children simply because I was always in their stuff. And I can look at them today, and each of them, I've got 3 girls. So this conversation is interesting to me, to say the least. But 2 of my 3 daughters have their own small businesses, and they also work. They have good husbands, which I kind of had something to say about that. That young man that's going to come into my daughter's life. I wanted to shake his hand and look him in the eye and find out what he was about, to a point. But they had enough self-value to know the type of person that they wanted to be associated with, because I always drummed that into them from a father perspective, and their mothers were involved in their lives also. So it takes 2. That gets back to that family structure that I was talking about. But where that breaks down, then there has to be something else that picks that up so that we can continue to thrive and to function as a race, and to teach others to do the same, because we have to survive, and we can't sit around waiting on somebody to to take, to do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves.
You're absolutely right, Clarence. But also too, I mean, when it comes to women, it has to, like Ms. Berry said, I mean, you have to take hold of these girls. If she has no male role around her that will value her while she's young, they get their values from their mothers and friends. But once she leaves, that girl leaves that nest, now she doesn't really know what to look for when it comes to a man. This is why it's so valuable that, I mean, we're a mirror to our children. It's so valuable that with you, they saw a reflection of what a man should be or what type of husband that they want to be, because you were present. When there's no presence of man there, of course a woman is not going to, she can have value within herself, but she has to know and make sure that that mate or that male that she comes across value her in the same way too. And we as women, like I had a male friend tell me, and I know this is a little bit off, but he told me, he was like, I noticed how you black women, you all will accept a man because he's nice. He said, but from a man's perspective, we're not just accepting you because you're nice. There are a lot of other qualities that we're going to look for. And he said, he said, bringing up my daughters, I want them to have and look at those same qualities as me being a man. I want her to be able to look at that man and want those same qualities that I would want from a woman. He said, but a lot of times, our black women, we just settle. He said, we need to stop doing that because you're worth a whole lot more. And that's the first time I've ever heard a man say that. But also, I look at the fact of what Ms. Berry and Gail were saying as well. Our trauma, the trauma that we go through, even when you're young, and even in your own family where you may have that uncle. If somebody always got that uncle that has to put his hands on the female children in the family. You know what I'm saying? But the women will come and say, we don't talk about that. You don't talk about that. You leave that alone. That's trauma for that little girl. That's trauma in our family. And even in our culture, women have also assigned to this non-intersectionality that we have to just put up with it. And this is why Dr. Miss Berry is right. I had an experience with a doctor where it was my appendix, but this white doctor chose, and I was in the emergency room, he chose to decide for me that, no, you have an STD. And I was appalled, and I was like, I dare you. I've been 30 some years and you're going to tell me I have an STD? I come back a week later, it was my appendix. I told him it was my appendix, but he chose to tell me something totally different. And I made a complaint, and I made a complaint with my doctor, and she's a female, and she said out of her mouth, black women and white male doctors don't mix. They don't mix. And she was pissed. So I gave her his name. But you're right. These are the things that we deal with as being black women. And we don't have to just shut it off and bow our heads and walk away. No, challenge them on that. And I challenged him on that and told him he could keep his medication and where he could put it. Because I dare you accuse me of having an STD when I know it's my appendix. And when I went back to emergency room that week later with my husband, and I pointed him out, that's the doctor that tried to tell me. He turned it about face because I wanted him to know, yeah, I'm back because it's my appendix, you idiot. But I said a little bit more than that, of course. So, but it's just, I don't even. I have so many thoughts in my head and things that I want to say in regards to this. It's just because it's so deep. I mean, and I'm sure we've all have experienced it as women. but it's just so deep, and it's not just one set of problems or one set of things, and it would take centuries just to even nip a portion of it in the bud, a fourth of it in the bud. And I don't know. I just have so many mixed emotions when it comes to us as Black women, and the things that we face. And you know, no one wants to give validity to any of it, really, none of it.
Okay. So that, I mean, at this point, I understand what you're saying, Marcella, and I also thought about all of this even before bringing it to the show, because I feel that this is a conversation that has to continue. It has to be ongoing, and I will continue to bring this up on this show. Um, and plus, the question is always put to Dr. Crenshaw, well, what can we do? What can we do about some of this, at least about the women who are experiencing violence to the point of death? Um, so in 2014, the Center for Intersectionality and Social Studies Policy, they came up with the movement hashtag Say Her Name. And Say Her Name as a movement is largely based on the concept of intersectionality in order to bring attention to all victims of systemic violence. It's a term that intersectionality is a term that Dr. Kimberle Crenshaw was responsible for coining its earliest stage being dated to 1989. So, and the point of the movement, Say Her Name, is that we will not to not allow that person's death to happen in silence, and to not allow her family to grieve in silence, and that for the families, um, for them not to believe that their significant person, their lives were insignificant, like their family member or their friend. Their lives are indeed significant, and that the hope is that the invisibility will fall off the more we identify these people and give them a full portrait, rather than group them together as a bunch of women were killed over here and this and that, instead of, not giving them any identity at all. The movement Say Her Name, that to me was very, very, very powerful. And the first time that I heard of it was when Sandra Bland was killed under extremely suspicious circumstances. And the movement calls out intersectional failure to the point of death. And then it draws attention to various ways that Black women experience state-sanctioned violence at the hands of police. But as I said earlier, to extend that to violence, Black women and girls die at the hands of family members and friends as well. And and even as you said too, MJ, women being I don't know which one of you said it, being sexually assaulted, and the punishment that goes along, that is handed to someone who has committed a crime against a Black woman, does not fit the crime. No. Mm-mm. If they even go to jail, if they even go. So
I think having the experience of being over the summer, right at like, so COVID happened in March, and in May, I got the opportunity to work with Dr. Crenshaw in with the African American Policy Forum for their internship program, where they were like recent graduates or people who were engaged in different like civic initiatives to promote and amplify the initiatives of Say Her Name. So a lot of programming. So once the media was able to gain leverage on like, oh my God, there's a global pandemic and then there's this racial pandemic where like America is just like ill. Like, in case you didn't know, like America's racist. So pick, you know, it kind of just like showed everybody what was going on a global level. It's like a global embarrassment on top of the fact that we are dealing with something that is impacting everyone, but Black people at a disproportionate number. And different companies wanted to say like, oh, how can we promote how we're not racist? Like, how can we figure out to show the world like, yeah, America's messed up, but like we're not, we're here, but we're not with them. So you have these opportunities where change agents like young people are able to engage in spaces and with stakeholders who are like strong decision makers. So, and Kimberle Crenshaw like dates back to Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. So she served on like like the legal counsel for Anita Hill, where everybody was just like, that Black woman needs to shut up. You know, she's she's up here talking about this. We're about to get the first Black male Supreme Court justice. Come to find out, he's a terrible monster, like just disgusting. Believe Black women. But to say her name platform like kind of just gained even more momentum, where we are in spaces with the WNBA and they're wearing our shirts and promoting the opportunity to just have a dialogue with policy changers in addition to spreading different conversations. So we were able to engage with people who promoted equity in prison reform, because Black women are largely present within our incarceration system, or being able to just have conversations with Sandra Bland's family members, Breonna Taylor's mother, and they work with Dr. Crenshaw to have different conversations and to continue promoting the idea that Black death is not just like a holistic thing, especially if you're just really being louder about the Black males as opposed to Black women. But it's not just in murders that are connected to state killings. So it is in so many other facets of our lives. And we need to really be able to position ourselves accordingly as a people to like pour into our younger children and really facilitate opportunities where they understand the power of their voice, or the power of actions that can not only improve their own lives, but the lives of people in their same area who have the same challenges as they do, or for those that are going to come in the future.
Well, I think this is especially in the past couple years, we are beginning to see the young athletes who are making millions of dollars in contracts and salaries and so forth. And more of them are starting to get involved in communities, either where they came from or the communities where they are, where they're playing ball. And they're starting to create or support foundations or create foundations that will help to kind of turn some things around. And the fact that one of the things that is lacking is proper resources to do the things that need to be done. We still, I still harp on the fact that I don't know what I don't know. People don't know what they don't know. And there has to be a mechanism, or someone has to have a bullhorn where they can put information out that can be received by the people that need to receive it. One of the things that, from my perspective, one of the things that happened from a positive perspective was the virus, because it forced people to be at home and they were watching television and they began to see a lot of things that they had ignored or they hadn't seen. They began to understand that the story that Black people had been telling about the injustices that they have been subjected to for years, and that George Floyd situation kind of woke up a lot of people, and they began, especially a lot of white people, and they began to question, well, wow, that guy didn't have to do that, or he didn't have to do that. Well, we've been telling you these things happened for a long time. You weren't listening, but now you saw it for yourself. And as we began to get the media exposure so that everyone can get some idea of what we're talking about, Black Lives Matter, that was a phrase that was hijacked as far as I'm concerned. And all kinds of definitions got put on the term Black Lives Matter. And, you know, we can say, yeah, Black lives do matter, but we have a different definition of what we're talking about. But when it's left to other people to try and define that, they are not going to define it the way we're talking about. It's defined entirely different.
Right, and that's done intentionally to when we make complaint, we're thought of as playing the victim, instead of our concerns or our issues being heard for what they really are. And that's a huge problem, and it's going to continue to be. But we have to continue to speak up. We have to do what we need to do. Uh, Reach out to our legislators, especially now we have a new administration, and we have to continue to be proactive, extremely proactive, if we want to change the world to be better for our children's children, because we can't go back to life the way it was and the way it's been allowed to play out for us. That's not going to work. And I want to say too, 'cause we have a couple more minutes before the show is done, is that when we think about this is just so much history that comes with the way Black women and girls are being brought up and how they're being valued, taught to be valued. We deserve to be loved, valued, and protected the same as any other person, whether they're white, Black, green, or yellow. And we matter, and we're not invisible. We're very real. And yes, continue to say those names. Continue to teach your child to be proud of who they are. And I want to say too, in our community, I've heard too, like when I talk to police officers, that the reason why, like, if they go out and talk to the community after these women have been killed and nobody wants to stand up for them, nobody wants to show up for them, because, oh, they were out there doing this and that. And I just want to say that way of thinking is just as bad as when white folks believe that something like AIDS was just a homosexual disease, and it wound up being an epidemic, or the same as this coronavirus. And they're putting out in the media that it was hitting Black and brown communities, where white people were thinking, oh, well, that's them. So if you take the idea thinking that's them, this is how they're going to consider dealing with anything that has to do with us. If we don't care enough to make noise, I don't care what you said your family member was out there doing, they still didn't deserve to be killed and thrown in the street or in the garbage like they're nothing. If you don't want to say something, you don't want to raise hell about that happening to a human being, your family member or your friend, then that's how they feel about issues that deal with us anyway. So you have to stand up and you have to say something and you have to show up. That's my final word for today.
Well, also too, and what I just wanted to say, I need for us to go. I have a question too. Well, you know what, Miss Berry, I wanted to address you. What is it that we can say to Black women, period, so that they can be aware? A lot of Black women aren't aware of this. They're not aware of the fact that, I mean, we have societally and around the world, we have no value. Quick, I remember when these students from not Morehouse, what is the all girls Black university? They went to Japan. Yeah, and they went to Japan, and the Japanese young, they were young. They try to be hip hop. They try to be like US, and they thought it was a term of endearment to call these women bitches. And the girls were scared and they were appalled. And they had a big conversation about it, but they were scared and they were appalled that these men, these Japanese men, when they went to Japan, dressed them like that. But this is what was put out, and it was put out by us. I mean, by how the video. So it was a big thing about it, and a lot of the big hip hop stars of they chimed in on it, and you know, looking at some of it, and these are like some really big, heavy hitters that were in the music industry. They gave it no validation for it. Well, that's just because of the videos. We're here to make money and this and that. And they were trying to get them to stop doing this in these videos because of the impact it was having globally when Black women traveled. And they thought it was okay to put their hands on them. But you had a lot of Black women that didn't see any validation in those young women's words either, and what had happened to them. How do you first start with us to recognize that this is how they view us all over? So what do we do? It has to be, I love it when they say her name, but it's going to be to the point, not the ones who died, but the ones who are living. Say my name and recognize that I'm a Black woman. I am human. I am whole, and I have validity. The things that I'm going through, even in my own race with my same sex of Black women, Black men, and other cultures of people. It's more daunting and more hurting when it's coming from your own and when it's coming from another female. So how do we start? I think we should start there. And how do we?
So I'm gonna speak in terms of like what I would like to see, not necessarily. I mean, I think that initially, I think we should prioritize addressing the trauma, because if you already feel as though you're inferior, people are going to treat you as such, right? But if you don't know, you're not aware of your worth and your value and like what you bring to the table, you're not playing your game. So I think we need to empower ourselves, other Black women, and young girls to understand how you can capitalize on your presence. I also think like I think Shirley Chisholm said like if they won't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. My thing is like leave them alone. Like I would rather if I had a one wish in terms of like improving the conditions of Black life globally, it would be to create spaces in which it's just us and we don't really need input. Like I would like to take more of a like a Black nationalist approach in which like all of our resources are within our own scope of control. So I think if we are no longer even using others as a consideration, I'm so far away from like, how do we get them to see us? I don't care what you see. I don't care about the interpretation that you have. I'm more interested in like, how am I going to take this little baby and make sure that they understand you don't have to wait for them. You don't have to wait for them to see you because you exist without them even having a say. So I would just want to make decisions that silenced or erased their impact or even influence. I would rather remove like the consideration. And I think until we are in a place in which we truly believe like what we need is internal. We already have exactly what it is that we need. So we don't even have to worry about, these are non-factors. Like these people are non-factors. Internally within us as a people, we have everything that we need. So I think if more people have that kind of mindset, and I think a mindset shift needs to occur in terms of people like understanding systems and understanding how to execute things to get the outcomes that you desire. So if you want your children to be educated accordingly, you cannot put yourself in a position in which the oppressor is educating your children, because that's like, if the hunter always tells the story, the lion is always the villain. It's all like, but like our children are lions. So it's just like, let ask the lion to tell the story and you would have a completely different, point of view. So I think that's where we need to invest more time and energy and just finding what resources we can put together to have less dependency on others.
That kind of goes along with something that I said last week, I think it was, when I said that integration didn't do us any favors because it caused us to my perspective, it caused us to start thinking we were something other than what we were, instead of looking at who we were.
Absolutely.
We started to want to compare who we were with somebody else who was totally different than what we were. And because we looked at it, and that gets into the value thing, because we didn't really value who we were, we wanted to be like them because we thought they were more important than we were. And subsequently, that's where we are. Miss Berry, I just wanted to ask you, the program Know Your Value, I think it's Mika Brzezinski. I don't know if she came up with it, but it's associated with her. Uh, that kind of coincides with something that you had been saying and pushing for, is we as a people, and Black women in particular specifically, uh, know your value. Understand that you are a valuable commodity. You matter. And then we can spread that out to all Black folks. Matter. Black lives matter. And we are valuable. And we're finding out every day just how valuable we are, because we're finding out that we did things that we just never knew about because it was hidden from us.
We have to stop believing the lie.
Right.
I don't know, like in being in education, my mother was an educator. My grandmother, like I had a grandmama, like I had a collard green growing grandmama. Like she had a garden, like we ate everything from the garden. Oh, I also agree with the point that you made in terms of the pandemic providing like some type of positive outcomes in terms of us being able to just sit and see what is going on, and for others to sit and see. But it also gave opportunities for me to think about, like I started my own garden this summer, and just tying in and just finding value in things that are already present, that I don't think children even understand that they even have the capabilities of doing that. And it's not just young children. I think I'm 36 and I'm just like, I still learn something. So I think it's the importance of also instilling, like, you don't always have to be a student, but you could always be a learner.
Right.
And the more you learn about yourself through the histories and the rich layers of us as a people, I think that's also affirming. So it kind of like reinforces concepts about our worth, and being able to have like dialogues such as this about what is necessary, what should be our focus, what should be initiatives that we enact and bring into practice, or like resuscitate and bring back, where people just like, I had no idea. So I think that are like is what I'm left with after having such a good conversation tonight.
So let me ask you a question real quick, Miss Berry. So are your students, are they young kids, high school or
Elementary school. So I am no longer in the classroom, and I've worked in different schools throughout the city. For the most part, I always taught either on the west side or the south side, and it was just Black kids. As I traveled through like different schools, my current school is very ethnically diverse. There are a lot of, it's a strong, high population of Arabic students. There are Latinx students, international students. I've even had experiences working with, in which the majority of the school, within the school as a whole, there were over like 55 languages spoken amongst the student population. So they're kids from literally all over the world that attended that school. But I mean, you never forget your Black kid. Like you don't forget your little West Side kids that you love. You don't forget your South Side kids, because you have those experiences. And then I have experiences, and like I was telling a younger teacher today, I've taught families and I never even knew their parents. Like, oh, I taught their cousin, their sister, their little brother, like a whole family, never knew their mama. And then I see them at the graduation, like, oh, hi. But like, where were you?
Yeah, where you been?
So it's like, it's all of these things, but you also have to understand that parents are working, they have different schedules that may not, you have to think about the quality of jobs or offerings that those families have, and how it impacts like the educational process of their children. Class is an issue. So it's all of these things where you see intersectionality, not so much as like a theoretical idea, but you can see like the concept, like working through people that you come in contact with. So like intersectionality is not just within the confines of like Black women or like Black heterosexual women. It can be like Black trans, I mean, poor, coming from like the West Coast versus the East Coast. Like there's all of these different facets that you have to consider. But I just want everybody to win, especially like Black women, because we're the fuel. We're the fuel that keeps everything going. Everything.
Is Black history still present in schools? Because I get online with my grandson almost every morning, and he has a white teacher, and they try to do a little something, and it's almost like a struggle. And I just sit there, like today, I kind of cringed a bit because she was playing hip hop for them, trying to get them engaged, and said, which music do you like better, hip hop or jazz? And I love jazz, and she played something. She played Heidi Ho. I wanted to tell her so bad. Well, that's not jazz. That's actually swing dancing music. But anyway, I was just wondering if, because I remember when the Board of Education was sued by some of the, the Black constituents in the school. I think it was not the Board of Education. I mean, not education in the other sense, but they were sued by some of the Black ministers and some of the Black leaders at that time to even bring Black history into the school. And then they had to go back to court some years later because they still were not practicing. So I was just curious as to whether it's even still really highly present in the school.
I think it depends on the school. It depends on the staff. So most public schools have adopted the Common Core standards. And if you engage in like the new teacher like rollout, like if you become a student teacher or you major in education, the big buzzwords are like culturally responsive pedagogy, meaning like you are considering the identities of children. So when you think about the identities, you could have a Black student that's a female that is adopted, that is also a little person. So it's like all of these like identities. As a teacher, best practice is to consider, I need to find the type of curriculum or create different types of learning tasks that affirm this student. So maybe I'm going to find a book. If I'm a reading teacher, I'm going to find a book that has a character that is Black, a Black female. Or maybe I'm going to find an informational text that covers how a little person did something extraordinary. That will be culturally responsive. This is the tricky part. you have teachers that say like, oh yeah, I think it is important to find different activities and tasks that are not only challenging, but affirm the child, but they may not know how to roll it out without it being like, just like a caricature of what it should be. So like the white teacher say, hey ho, it's Black History Month. Like, I don't really appreciate that, but I guess I can tip my hat off to the attempt. But like, is the attempt causing more harm than good? Does it? And one could argue like, well, I found the rigorous enough text, and this is on the grade level that it's supposed to be. So, and I've hit all of the boxes, but have you hit all of the boxes well is important. And I think also every school is different, where you have different legislature or your LSC that may have different stipulations in terms of what can actually be implemented, how the implementation needs to be looked at, the type of curriculum that is agreed upon by the school leaders. There's all of these different moving pieces. So I think that teachers can always find loopholes to promote culturally responsive resources and curriculum and all of the content, but like the quality of it is different. Are we really investing in ensuring that teachers are prepared to actually roll this type of instruction out? Where I could tell you, like if I were a math teacher, I could tell you, I could do an assignment where you just look at gas stock. Like you look at the NASDAQ and you just say like, gas prices are fluctuating. Let's just look at the stock exchange. Or I could have students do research on the gas prices in their neighborhood versus affluent white neighborhoods, and then have a discussion on that. That's hitting multiple points where students understand like there's a price discrepancy. Why are poor people why do they have to pay more to commute, whereas their white counterparts are not doing the same? What are the implications of like prices of gas, the price of gas different? Would you opt to take the bus? Or, there's a lot of different ways, but you have to be thoughtful and understanding like, is the school that your children are at, are they promoting and teaching the whole child? Is it tapping into the whole child?
Okay.
And that could be from year to year, I guess, because you can have a good third grade teacher and a bad fourth grade teacher and be like, dang, and you'll be waiting for the sixth grade teacher because you've heard good things. So
yeah, that's what my granddaughter tells me actually. She says exactly what you just said. All right. Well, thank you all for coming in the conversation tonight. A very important discussion that will continue. Thank you, Danielle Berry, for spending this hour and a half with us. And it's just too good to stop. I know I promised everybody that we would end it in an hour, but absolutely I would not shut this conversation down. Thank you, MJ. Thank you, Clarence. And for our viewers, hope to see you back next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. To reach out to the show is Shypanther and Friends Show #1 at Gmail. The website is shypanthermediagroup.org. And we'll see you next time. Thank God for his grace and mercy. Take care of yourselves and your neighbor. Good night.
And good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
Night.
It was enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything. I truly enjoyed this, Gail. I'm so glad we connected. If you need anything, I can just rattle on all night. So
that would be great.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep in touch. I was thinking that all while you were speaking.
Okay, well, I
everybody.
look forward to it. You
Okay.
guys have a wonderful evening. Be safe.
Nice meeting you, Miss Berry.
Nice meeting you as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. I appreciate you all.
Okay, nice
You're
meeting you
welcome.
too,
Good night.
MJ.
All right, Clarence. Don't let me come after you.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night, you all. Good night.